There is a very specific kind of dread that only a full moon can trigger. The slow crack of bone, the tearing of clothes, the moment a friend, a lover, or a stranger on a lonely road stops being human entirely. Werewolves have prowled cinema screens for nearly a century, from lumbering universal monsters in fog-choked forests to gore-drenched practical transformations that still make audiences wince decades later. This is Movie Blanket Club, and because this genre has quietly produced some of horror's finest craftsmanship, today we are counting down our picks for the 50 best werewolf movies ever made. One quick warning. Our number one pick is a scrappy British soldiers versus monsters film that we are ranking above the genre's own most celebrated classic, and we think we can defend it. Grab your blanket and keep an eye on the moon. Number 50. The Wolf House, 2018. A young woman fleeing a sinister rural colony hides inside an abandoned house where her isolation and guilt slowly warp the walls, furniture, and her own body into a nightmarish, ever-shifting stop-motion nightmare loosely inspired by the real story of a Chilean cult. Directors Cristobal Leon and Joaquin Cosina spent years hand-animating the film using constantly repainted walls and reshaped papier-mâché figures, giving every frame a genuinely unsettling sense that nothing on screen is ever quite finished transforming. Its extreme art house style and near-total absence of conventional plot make it one of the most demanding entries on this list, closer to a moving nightmare than a traditional werewolf story. That demand is entirely intentional, using folkloric transformation as a metaphor for indoctrination and psychological control rather than a straightforward monster movie. Its wolf imagery, half-glimpsed and constantly reforming, remains unlike anything else produced in the genre. Few films this experimental have earned this much serious critical attention. The directors reportedly repainted and reshaped the same physical rooms hundreds of times over years of production, rather than building separate sets for each stage of the story. Our pick for the most formally audacious entry on this list, transformation horror rendered as literal, handcrafted nightmare. Number 49. House of Frankenstein, 1944. An escaped mad scientist and his hunchbacked assistant travel with a Chamber of Horrors sideshow, reviving Count Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, and Lawrence Talbot the Wolfman along the way, in one of Universal's ambitious attempts to cram its entire stable of classic monsters into a single feature. Lon Chaney Jr. reprises his tragic Wolfman role once again, desperately seeking a cure for his curse even as chaos erupts around him from every other monster sharing the screen. Its crowded plot juggles far too many characters and subplots for any single monster, including the Wolfman, to receive the focus longtime fans might want. That overstuffed quality is also part of the film's considerable charm, a genuine monster rally curiosity that captures the tail end of Universal's golden age of horror before the studio's classic monsters began to feel overexposed. Boris Karloff appears as the scheming scientist rather than the monster this time, adding another layer of series trivia. Its gothic production design remains impressively lavish for a Universal programmer. Universal originally planned an even larger monster ensemble before budget and runtime constraints trimmed the cast of creatures down to the 3 that made the final release. Our pick for the most purely nostalgic entry on this list, the Wolfman sharing top billing with an entire monster convention. Number 48. Werewolves on Wheels, 1971. A biker gang wandering the American desert stumbles into a satanic monastery, and after one member is cursed during a dark ritual, the group finds itself hunted by a werewolf hiding somewhere within its own ranks as paranoia and violence tear the gang apart from the inside. Director Michael Levesque blends biker exploitation cinema with occult horror, capturing a distinctly grimy early 70s countercultural mood that few later werewolf films ever bothered to replicate. Its pacing meanders considerably, often more interested in extended motorcycle riding footage than plot momentum or scares. That meandering quality has become part of its cult appeal decades later, a genuinely strange artifact of drive-in exploitation cinema that captures a very specific moment in American subculture. Its werewolf transformation effects are minimal, leaning far more on mood and implied menace than practical spectacle. The film's soundtrack and desert cinematography give it a hypnotic, sun-baked identity all its own. The film was largely improvised on location, with several actual biker gang members recruited from nearby clubs to fill out the cast alongside trained performers. Our pick for the most purely countercultural entry on this list: bikers and lycanthropy sharing the same broken-down highway. Number 47. Werewolf of Washington, 1973. A White House press secretary bitten by a wolf while abroad returns to Washington, D.C. and begins transforming into a werewolf during the Capitol's political scandals, his monthly rampages becoming an unlikely metaphor for the era's mounting distrust of government institutions during the Watergate years. Writer-director Milton Moses Ginsburg leans hard into political satire, using the werewolf premise as a thin disguise for pointed jokes about presidential corruption and press complicity rather than pure horror. Its low-budget and deliberately campy tone will frustrate viewers expecting a straightforward monster movie rather than political comedy wearing horror's clothing. That satirical intent is exactly why the film has found a small cult audience since, a genuinely odd product of its specific Watergate-era moment that few other werewolf films have ever attempted to replicate. Dean Stockwell anchors the transformation with real committed silliness throughout. Its topical humor has aged into a strange historical curiosity worth revisiting. Filming reportedly took place quietly around Washington, D.C. using minimal permits, with the crew keeping a low profile given the politically sensitive subject matter. Our pick for the most politically pointed entry on this list: lycanthropy repurposed as a joke about Washington itself. Number 46. Legend of the Werewolf, 1975. Raised by wolves as an infant before being taken in by a traveling circus, a young man struggles to control his violent transformations once he settles in Paris, eventually drawing the attention of a curious pathologist investigating a string of gruesome murders connected to his condition. Produced by Tyburn Films, a British studio explicitly founded to continue the gothic horror tradition after Hammer's own output began winding down, the film leans heavily on familiar genre trappings: fog-choked streets, sympathetic monster, dogged investigator, rather than innovating much beyond them. Its budget constraints show clearly against the more polished Hammer productions it consciously imitates. What the film offers regardless is a solidly old-fashioned, well-cast slice of British Gothic horror, anchored by Peter Cushing's reliably excellent supporting performance as the pathologist piecing the mystery together. Its practical transformation effects, while modest, carry real, earnest craftsmanship. David Rintoul brings a genuine, wounded sympathy to the cursed lead role. Tyburn Films folded not long after this release, making the picture one of the studio's final gothic horror productions before British horror's commercial decline. Our pick for the most classically old-fashioned entry on this list: gothic werewolf horror carrying Hammer's torch a little further. Number 45, The Beast Must Die, 1974. A wealthy big-game hunter invites a group of suspicious guests to his remote estate, convinced one of them is secretly a werewolf, and rigs the entire property with cameras and traps in hopes of identifying and killing the beast before the next full moon forces its hand. Structured explicitly as a whodunit, the film even pauses before its climax for an on-screen countdown timer inviting the audience to guess the werewolf's identity themselves. A truly playful gimmick unlike anything else in the genre. Its low budget and uneven pacing between the mystery segments and actual werewolf action will test viewers expecting a more consistent horror experience throughout. That gimmick is exactly why the film has earned lasting cult affection, blending Agatha Christie-style mystery construction with monster movie mechanics in a combination really unique to this list. Calvin Lockhart anchors the hunt with cool, controlled intensity. Its ensemble of suspects keeps the guessing game engaging despite the modest production values. The countdown gimmick was reportedly added specifically to give theatrical audiences a chance to guess the killer before the reveal, an unusual interactive marketing hook for its era. Our pick for the most structurally inventive entry on this list, a werewolf movie that turns its own mystery into an audience game. Number 44. Full Moon High, 1981. A high schooler bitten by a werewolf while traveling abroad with his father returns home decades later. Still physically a teenager thanks to his curse, forced to repeat high school indefinitely while dealing with monthly transformations and the distinctly absurd comedy of never being allowed to grow up. Writer-director Larry Cohen, better known for horror films played straighter, leans entirely into broad comedy here, treating lycanthropy as a goofy extended metaphor for arrested adolescence rather than genuine terror. Its comedic tone and dated high school humor have not aged evenly, with jokes that land considerably softer for modern audiences than they likely did on release. That silliness is very much the point. A rare, full comedic swing at werewolf mythology that stands apart from the genre's usual grim seriousness. Adam Arkin anchors the film's satirical high school setting with committed comic energy throughout. Its premise of eternal teenage werewolf purgatory remains an unmistakably clever comedic hook. Larry Cohen wrote the script specifically as a satire of arrested development, reportedly drawing on his own frustrations with Hollywood's reluctance to let him grow past genre typecasting. Our pick for the goofiest entry on this list, lycanthropy played entirely for laughs rather than dread. Number 43. I Was a Teenage Werewolf, 1957. A troubled high school student undergoes experimental hypnotherapy meant to control his violent outbursts, only for his unscrupulous doctor's regression treatment to unlock a primal, murderous werewolf state that begins claiming victims around the school and town. Made quickly and cheaply to capitalize on 1950s teen monster double features, the film became a real commercial phenomenon, one of the most profitable independent films of its entire era relative to its tiny budget. Its plot mechanics are thin even by the standards of the drive-in features it was designed to run alongside, existing mainly to deliver its irresistible title and poster rather than deep characterization. That commercial instinct paid off spectacularly, launching Michael Landon's career and cementing the teenage monster subgenre as a viable, repeatable formula throughout the rest of the decade. Its transformation makeup, simple by later standards, still carries a certain scrappy charm. The film's title alone has outlived most of its contemporaries in pop culture memory. The film's success reportedly prompted a sequel the same year, followed swiftly by a wave of imitators chasing the same teen monster drive-in formula. Our pick for the most commercially influential entry on this list, a low-budget gimmick that accidentally became a genre cornerstone. Number 42. Werewolf of London, 1935. A botanist bitten by a mysterious creature while collecting a rare Tibetan flower returns home to London, gradually transforming into a werewolf during the full moon and setting off a desperate search for the only plant capable of curing him before his condition claims someone he loves. Predating Universal's own more famous Wolfman by 6 years, this film stands as the very first werewolf feature Hollywood ever produced, establishing transformation makeup techniques and full moon mythology that would become genre standards for decades afterward. Its comparatively stiff, theatrical performances and slower pace reflect the era's filmmaking conventions more than modern horror pacing. That historical position is exactly why the film matters. An authentic genre foundation stone that quietly invented rules later films, including its own more celebrated successor, would simply inherit wholesale. Henry Hull's dual performance as scientist and monster carries real tragic weight. Its influence on every subsequent werewolf film is difficult to overstate despite its relative obscurity today. Universal's makeup department, led by Jack Pierce, developed transformation techniques here that would be refined and reused across the studio's later, more famous werewolf productions. Our pick for the most historically foundational entry on this list, the werewolf genre's actual point of origin. Number 41. The Curse of the Werewolf, 1961. Born under a curse following his mother's brutal circumstances of conception in a Spanish dungeon, A young man grows up struggling against a violent, uncontrollable transformation that emerges whenever his passions run too high, forcing those who love him into an agonizing choice about how far they will go to save him. Hammer Film Productions, already established as horror's premier studio through its Dracula and Frankenstein pictures, brought the same lavish Gothic craft to werewolf mythology here, with rich color cinematography and detailed period sets far beyond typical genre budgets of the era. Oliver Reed, in his first major film role, delivers a plainly sympathetic anguish performance that treats the curse as real tragedy rather than simple monster spectacle. Its slow first half, focused heavily on the character's traumatic backstory, tests viewers eager to reach the actual werewolf content sooner. That patience is repaid with one of the genre's most emotionally substantial werewolf stories, treating lycanthropy as inherited trauma rather than simple bad luck. Its rich Gothic atmosphere remains a genre high point. Hammer reportedly fought censors extensively over the film's violence and suggested sexual content, trimming several scenes before British release could proceed. Our pick for the most emotionally substantial entry on this list, a curse treated with sincere, tragic weight. Number 40. Wolf Guy, 1975. A lone Wolf Clan survivor working as an underworld enforcer in Tokyo investigates a string of bizarre deaths tied to a cursed nightclub singer, uncovering a government conspiracy while his own suppressed werewolf nature threatens to erupt amid the escalating violence surrounding him. Starring martial arts icon Sonny Chiba at the height of his 70s stardom, the film mashes together Yakuza crime thriller, supernatural horror, and paranoid conspiracy plotting into something gleefully, chaotically overstuffed. Its narrative logic frequently takes a backseat to sheer tonal whiplash, lurching between genres with little concern for coherence between them. That chaos is exactly why the film has become a beloved cult curiosity among genre enthusiasts, a thoroughly singular slice of 70s Japanese exploitation cinema unlike anything Western werewolf films were attempting at the same time. Chiba's magnetic screen presence anchors even the film's strangest detours. Its blend of werewolf mythology and Yakuza grit remains wholly its own. Sonny Chiba reportedly performed several of his own stunts, a hallmark of his 70s output that gives the film's action sequences real physical immediacy. Chiba reportedly improvised several fight sequences on the day of filming, giving the movie's action beats an unpredictable, loose energy distinct from more choreographed genre fare. Our pick for the most gloriously chaotic entry on this list, lycanthropy filtered through Japanese crime cinema at its most unrestrained. Number 39. The Wolves of Kromer, 1998. In a small English village where two young werewolves are treated as accepted, if uneasy members of the community, a tender romance develops between them just as the villagers' tolerance for their condition begins curdling into violent persecution. Adapted from a stage play and shot on an extremely modest budget, director Will Gould uses the werewolf premise as a fairly direct allegory for queer persecution and small-town intolerance, a reading the film makes little effort to disguise or soften. Its theatrical origins show clearly in the stagey performances and limited scope, a far cry from the polished creature feature spectacle typical of the genre. That directness is precisely the film's quiet power, using lycanthropy as a wholly tender metaphor for love that a community refuses to accept rather than pure horror spectacle. Its low-key, melancholy tone sets it apart from nearly everything else on this list. James Layton and Lee Williams anchor the central romance with real vulnerability. The stage production the film was adapted from ran for several years in British theaters before this modest screen adaptation reached a wider audience. Our pick for the most emotionally unusual entry on this list, werewolf mythology repurposed entirely as a love story under siege. Number 38. Bad Moon, 1996. A photojournalist infected with lycanthropy during a violent attack abroad moves his trailer onto his sister's rural property, hoping isolation will protect his family. only for the household's dog to become the sole creature aware of what he truly becomes once the moon rises. Director Eric Red keeps the story tightly focused and efficiently paced, favoring atmosphere and a slow-building sense of domestic dread over sprawling mythology or excessive subplots. Its low-budget creature effects, while committed, occasionally show their seams under closer scrutiny compared to the era's more expensive genre output. What the film gets right is a startlingly clever narrative device, framing much of the escalating danger through the family dog's perspective and instincts, a fresh angle rarely attempted elsewhere in werewolf cinema. Michael Paré anchors the increasingly desperate lead role with real conviction. Its tight, economical 79-minute runtime keeps the tension consistently taut throughout. Director Eric Red also wrote The Hitcher and Near Dark, giving this film a lineage connected to two other truly influential 80s genre pictures. Our pick for the most efficiently constructed entry on this list, domestic horror with an unusually inventive canine twist. Number 37. Skinwalkers, 2006. A young boy approaching his 16th birthday, unaware he carries a rare bloodline capable of breaking a werewolf curse entirely, becomes the target of two warring werewolf factions, one determined to protect his human life, and the other desperate to keep the curse intact by any means necessary. Director James Isaacs stages the conflict as an action-heavy siege thriller, with heavily armed werewolf factions squaring off in prolonged shootouts more reminiscent of vampire hunter action cinema than traditional lycanthrope horror. Its plotting leans heavily on genre-familiar Chosen One mechanics, and critical reception at the time was largely unfavorable toward the film's derivative execution. That derivative quality aside, the film's ambitious mythology, splitting werewolf society into ideologically opposed camps rather than a single monolithic threat, offers a more structurally interesting premise than its execution ultimately delivers. Elias Koteas and Jason Behr anchor the opposing factions with committed if underserved performances. Its action-forward approach to werewolf mythology remains a fairly unusual angle for the genre. The film underwent reshoots after test audiences reportedly found the original cut's mythology too confusing to follow without additional clarifying scenes. Our pick for the most structurally ambitious misfire on this list, an interesting premise buried under a fairly generic execution. Number 36. Blood and Chocolate, 2007. A young American woman living among a secretive werewolf pack in Bucharest falls for a human graphic novelist, a forbidden romance that puts her at odds with the pack's rigid traditions and its ruthless alpha leader, who has his own designs on claiming her as a mate. Adapted loosely from Annette Curtis Klaus's young adult novel, the film arrived squarely in the middle of the mid-2000s supernatural romance boom, aiming for a tone somewhere between gothic fairy tale and teen melodrama. Its softened, romance-forward approach to werewolf mythology strips away most of the genre's traditional horror elements, disappointing viewers expecting something closer to a monster movie. That softness was a deliberate marketing choice for its target audience, though the film's atmospheric Romanian location shooting and stylish pack hierarchy mythology offer real visual craft beneath the romantic plotting. Agnes Bruckner anchors the forbidden romance with earnest, committed sincerity. Its rooftop chase sequences remain an unmistakable visual highlight. Filming took place on location in Romania, giving the pack's forest and village scenes an authentic Eastern European backdrop rarely used elsewhere in the genre. Our pick for the most romance-forward entry on this list, werewolf mythology reframed almost entirely as gothic fairy tale. Number 35. Cursed, 2005. A brother and sister attacked by a mysterious creature on a Los Angeles freeway begin exhibiting strange new abilities and violent urges, setting off a frantic search to identify which of the people around them is secretly the werewolf responsible before the next full moon claims another victim. Reuniting Scream collaborators Wes Craven and Kevin Williamson, the film promised a witty, self-aware werewolf take similar to their earlier slasher revival, but suffered a notoriously troubled production, with extensive reshoots and a nearly complete cast overhaul during filming. Those production troubles show clearly in the finished film's uneven tone and choppy pacing, a deeply frustrating disconnect from the sharp genre commentary the creative team was known for. That behind-the-scenes chaos has made the film a true object of curiosity for horror historians, a high-pedigree production undone almost entirely by its own turbulent journey to the screen. Christina Ricci anchors the mystery with committed energy despite the surrounding disarray. Its werewolf transformation effects remain a modest bright spot. The production reportedly recast several key roles partway through filming, contributing to the finished film's notably uneven continuity and tone. Our pick for the most fascinating behind-the-scenes disaster on this list, talent and turmoil colliding in equal measure. Number 34, Red Riding Hood, 2011. In a snowbound medieval village terrorized by a werewolf that has coexisted uneasily with the townsfolk for generations, a young woman finds herself at the center of mounting suspicion and forbidden romance once a visiting witch hunter arrives insisting the creature is hiding in plain sight among people she loves. Director Catherine Hardwicke, fresh off launching the Twilight franchise, aims for a similarly moody, romance-forward young adult tone here, reimagining the classic fairy tale as a werewolf whodunit wrapped in gothic teen melodrama. Its mystery plotting leans heavily on genre-familiar red herrings, and critical reception was largely unfavorable toward the film's derivative Twilight-adjacent styling. That styling aside, the film's snowy village production design and central who is the werewolf mystery structure offer a reasonably engaging hook, even when the execution around it feels overly familiar. Amanda Seyfried anchors the mystery with committed, if occasionally overwrought, sincerity. Its fairy tale werewolf premise remains a authentically clever hook regardless of execution. The film was shot largely in Vancouver, with extensive practical snow effects used to recreate its medieval European village setting. Our pick for the most fairy tale-inflected entry on this list, Little Red Riding Hood rebuilt as a werewolf mystery. Number 33, Howl, 2015. A late-night train traveling through the English countryside breaks down in a remote wooded area, and the small group of passengers and crew soon find themselves besieged by a pack of werewolves circling the stranded carriages with no way to call for help. Director Paul Hyatt, a veteran creature effects artist making his directorial debut, brings real practical effects expertise to the film's werewolf designs, favoring tactile, physically grounded monster work over digital enhancement. Its confined train setting limits the scope considerably, and character work remains fairly thin against the more pressing survival mechanics driving the plot forward. That confinement also generates real claustrophobic tension, transposing the werewolf siege template onto a convincingly novel setting rarely used elsewhere in the genre. Its creature designs lean into a more animalistic, less human-shaped werewolf aesthetic than most films attempt. Ed Spieleers anchors the ensemble's mounting panic with steady commitment. Director Paul Hyatt had previously worked as a creature and makeup effects artist on numerous other British horror productions before stepping behind the camera here. The train carriages used for filming were reportedly repurposed from a decommissioned line, giving the confined setting an unusually authentic, lived-in texture. Our pick for the most novel setting on this list, a werewolf siege with absolutely nowhere left for its passengers to run. Number 32. When Animals Dream, 2014. A quiet teenage girl in an isolated Danish fishing village begins noticing strange physical changes in her own body, changes her father seems to already understand, and her wheelchair-bound mother's own hidden condition suggests run much deeper into the family's bloodline than anyone around her has ever explained. Director Jonas Alexander Arnby treats the werewolf transformation as a slow-building metaphor for female adolescence and a small community's suffocating need to control and contain difference. Its glacial pace and heavy restraint on traditional werewolf spectacle will frustrate viewers expecting a more conventional creature feature from the premise. That restraint is entirely the point, using lycanthropy to dramatize a young woman's dawning power and the violent suspicion it provokes in the insular community around her. Sonia Soul's controlled, internalized lead performance carries the film's mounting transformation with real conviction. Its Scandinavian coastal setting lends the story an undeniably bleak, wind-scoured atmosphere. The film swept Denmark's Robert Awards on release, winning several categories including recognition for its lead performance and cinematography. Our pick for the most thematically ambitious entry on this list: werewolf mythology reworked entirely into a story about becoming yourself. Number 31. Wild Country, 2005. A group of Scottish teenagers on a countryside camping trip find themselves stalked by something monstrous roaming the surrounding hills, a threat that forces old friendships and buried resentments to the surface just as violently as the creature hunting them down one by one. Director Craig Strachan blends coming-of-age teen drama with lean creature feature mechanics, keeping the werewolf itself largely obscured for much of the runtime in favor of mounting dread among the group. Its low budget limits the werewolf's screen time considerably, a restraint that occasionally reads as withholding rather than deliberate tension building. That restraint mostly works in the film's favor regardless, letting the teenagers' fraught relationships carry real weight alongside the survival plot rather than existing purely as monster fodder. Its rugged Scottish Highland scenery gives the chase a noticeably isolating, inescapable backdrop. The ensemble cast brings real, lived-in naturalism to the group's fraying dynamic. Production took place across the Scottish Highlands, with the crew relying heavily on natural light and overcast weather to build the film's bleak atmosphere. Our pick for the most grounded coming-of-age entry on this list: teenage drama and lycanthropy sharing the same remote hillside. Number 30. WolfCop, 2014. A washed-up, perpetually drunk small-town police officer wakes up after a blackout with a mysterious occult symbol carved into his chest, and soon discovers the local ritual behind it has transformed him into a werewolf, one he decides to put to surprisingly effective use cleaning up his corrupt town's criminal underbelly. Director Lowell Dean fully embraces the film's inherently ridiculous premise, leaning into gleeful, practical gore, deliberate B-movie camp, and an honest sense of fun that refuses to take any of its own mythology too seriously. Its shoestring budget and intentionally trashy tone will not appeal to viewers seeking a more polished or straight-faced werewolf story. That trashiness is the entire appeal, a modern midnight movie throwback that understands exactly the kind of gonzo audience it is built for and delivers precisely that experience. Leo Fafard anchors the absurdity with a perfectly deadpan lead performance. Its practical transformation effects lean gleefully grotesque rather than restrained. The film's surprise success at genre festivals reportedly helped secure funding for a sequel released several years later, continuing the character's story. Dean has said the film's tone was directly inspired by his own love of 80s action comedies, aiming to recapture that decade's gleeful excess for a modern audience. Our pick for the most purely entertaining B-movie entry on this list: a drunk cop turned werewolf vigilante and loving every second of it. Number 29. Werewolves Within, 2021. A newly assigned forest ranger arriving in a snowbound mountain town finds the community's simmering feud over a proposed pipeline erupting into open paranoia once a werewolf begins picking off residents, forcing the trapped townsfolk to figure out who among their bickering neighbors might actually be the monster. Adapted loosely from a video game of the same name, director Josh Rubin structures the film as a comedic whodunit in the tradition of a classic parlor mystery, prioritizing sharp ensemble comedy over traditional horror scares. Its comedic tone and relatively restrained werewolf action may disappoint viewers expecting a more conventional monster movie from the premise. That comedic restraint is very much by design, using the mystery format and a markedly well-drawn small-town ensemble cast to sustain tension through suspicion rather than gore. Sam Richardson anchors the chaos with an appealingly earnest, bewildered lead performance. Its snowbound mountain lodge setting gives the mystery a cozy, contained charm. The video game the film loosely adapts was itself a fairly minor party title, giving the filmmakers considerable freedom to build a largely original story around its premise. Our pick for the wittiest entry on this list, a werewolf whodunit that trusts its ensemble more than its monster. Number 28. Late Phases, 2014. A blind, cantankerous Vietnam veteran moves into a quiet retirement community only to discover his new neighborhood is being stalked by a werewolf, and with only weeks until the next full moon, sets about arming himself and preparing for a direct confrontation despite his disability and the community's dismissive skepticism. Director Adrian Garcia Bogliano frames the film as a truly unusual siege thriller. Its elderly, blind protagonist forced to rely on hearing, memory, and sheer stubborn resolve, rather than typical action hero physicality. Its deliberate pace and heavy focus on character over spectacle test viewers, expecting a faster-moving creature feature from the premise. That patience pays off in a really satisfying final act. The veteran's meticulous, resourceful preparation for the confrontation, giving the film's climax real earned tension rather than pure monster spectacle. Nick D'Amici delivers a gruff, wounded performance that anchors the film's emotional core. Its practical werewolf effects remain impressively tactile for the budget. Star Nick D'Amici also co-wrote the screenplay, developing the blind veteran character specifically as a departure from typical action horror protagonists. Our pick for the most unexpectedly moving entry on this list, an unlikely hero proving disability is no obstacle to standing his ground. Number 27. Were, 2013. A defense attorney representing a man with a rare genetic disorder accused of a brutal family murder in the French countryside begins to suspect her client's condition may be entirely, horrifyingly literal, as mounting evidence suggests something far more monstrous than a simple medical explanation. Director William Brent Bell frames the film as a found-footage-adjacent legal thriller for much of its runtime, grounding the werewolf premise in police procedure, medical testimony, and courtroom strategy before letting the horror fully break loose. Its shaky cam aesthetic and hybrid genre approach have divided viewers, some finding the grounded framing unmistakably fresh, and others finding it an awkward fit for werewolf mythology. That grounding is exactly the film's most interesting swing, treating lycanthropy as a plausible medical condition subject to real investigative scrutiny rather than pure supernatural spectacle. A.J. Cook anchors the legal investigation with unfeigned, mounting unease. Its practical creature effects deliver a plainly feral, animalistic final act. The film was shot on location in rural Ontario, standing in for the French countryside, a common budget-driven substitution for international set genre productions. Our pick for the most procedurally grounded entry on this list, werewolf mythology treated like an actual criminal case. Number 26. The Beast Within, 1982. 17 years after his mother was attacked by an unidentifiable creature on their wedding night, a teenage boy begins undergoing a violent, agonizing transformation of his own, drawing his desperate parents into a small Mississippi town's buried secret about exactly what attacked her that night. Director Philippe Mora builds the film's mystery slowly, withholding the true nature of the creature's mythology until a startling, thoroughly grotesque late transformation sequence that stands apart from typical werewolf effects work entirely. Its meandering middle stretch and reliance on small-town gothic atmosphere over consistent scares test viewers expecting faster momentum throughout. That patience builds toward one of the genre's most notorious practical transformation sequences, closer to insect-like body horror than a conventional werewolf shift, and wholly startling for how far it departs from audience expectations. Ronnie Cox and Bibi Besh anchor the family drama with real anguished commitment. Its unconventional creature mythology remains an earnest talking point among genre fans. Practical effects artist Thomas R. Berman built the film's unconventional transformation sequence using techniques he would later refine across a long effects career. Our pick for the most shocking transformation sequence on this list, a werewolf story that swerves somewhere audiences never expect. Number 25, Teen Wolf, 1985. An awkward, unremarkable high school student discovers his family carries a werewolf bloodline, and rather than hiding his newfound condition, embraces it publicly, using his werewolf strength and charisma to transform overnight from social nobody into his school's most popular basketball star. Michael J. Fox, riding the momentum of Back to the Future's release that same year, brings easy, likable charm to a premise that treats lycanthropy as a wholesome, family-friendly metaphor for adolescent self-discovery rather than horror at all. Its gentle, low-stakes tone and dated 80s teen comedy sensibilities place it firmly outside traditional werewolf horror, a mismatch some genre purists have never fully forgiven. That family-friendly approach is exactly why the film became such a massive commercial hit, proving werewolf mythology could sustain an entirely different genre and audience than the bloody creature features surrounding it on this list. Its basketball court transformation scenes remain startlingly, endearingly goofy. The film's massive commercial success reportedly surprised its own studio, who had originally slated it as a modest secondary release before word of mouth took over. Fox specifically fast-tracked production to capitalize on Michael J. Fox's sudden stardom, reportedly rushing the film into theaters within months of Back to the Future's release. Our pick for the most purely charming entry on this list, lycanthropy repurposed as the ultimate teen makeover fantasy. Number 24, Wolf, 1994. A mild-mannered publishing executive bitten by a wolf on a snowy Vermont road finds the resulting infection sharpening his senses, restoring his confidence, and unleashing a newfound aggression that proves surprisingly useful as he battles corporate betrayal and a ruthless younger rival back at the office. Director Mike Nichols treats the werewolf premise as an elegant metaphor for reclaimed masculinity and corporate predation, favoring restrained literary sophistication over typical genre theatrics throughout most of the runtime. Its slow-burning, dialogue-heavy first half will test viewers expecting a more conventional creature feature from a cast this starry. That restraint pays off in an unusually well-acted psychological drama wearing a werewolf's clothing, anchored by Jack Nicholson's magnetic, increasingly feral lead performance opposite Michelle Pfeiffer's cool, controlled love interest. Its boardroom power struggles carry as much bite as the actual transformation scenes. James Spader is memorably slimy as the corporate rival circling for the kill. Rick Baker once again handled the transformation and makeup effects, marking one of several werewolf productions across his career following his earlier genre-defining work. Our pick for the most prestige-driven entry on this list, lycanthropy dressed up as elegant corporate thriller. Number 23. The Twilight Saga, New Moon, 2009. Left devastated after her vampire boyfriend abandons her for her own safety, a teenage girl finds comfort in her childhood friend Jacob, unaware his own body is beginning a violent transformation tied to an ancient shapeshifter bloodline running through his Quileute tribe. This entry in the massively popular young adult franchise shifts significant focus onto werewolf mythology for the first time, giving Jacob's pack and their uneasy truce with the vampire Cullen's real narrative weight alongside the central romantic triangle. Its teen romance melodrama and divisive reputation among horror purists have made it a deeply contentious inclusion on any werewolf list, dismissed by some as barely belonging to the genre at all. That contention aside, the film's box office dominance introduced werewolf mythology to an enormous mainstream audience who had likely never seen a traditional genre entry, reshaping the commercial landscape around supernatural romance for years afterward. Taylor Lautner's committed physical transformation into Jacob became a legitimate cultural touchstone. Its pack mythology, however divisive, expanded werewolf lore for a new generation. The werewolf pack's on-screen physiques required the young cast to undergo months of dedicated physical training ahead of filming their shirtless transformation sequences. Our pick for the most commercially inescapable entry on this list, werewolves reaching an audience the rest of this list never could. Number 22, Van Helsing, 2004. A legendary monster hunter travels to Transylvania to help a local family defeat Count Dracula, allying along the way with a werewolf-cursed nobleman whose own condition becomes an unexpected asset once Van Helsing himself is infected and forced to fight the vampire on equal, monstrous terms. Director Stephen Sommers throws Universal's classic monster roster, Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, and the Wolfman, into one enormous, effects-heavy action spectacle prioritizing kinetic set pieces over the moody atmosphere those original monsters were built on. Its overstuffed plot and heavy reliance on early 2000 CGI have aged unevenly, drawing real criticism for sacrificing Gothic atmosphere for over-the-top spectacle throughout. That spectacle-first approach still delivers a authentically massive-scale werewolf transformation sequence, one of the largest and most technically ambitious the genre has ever attempted on this kind of blockbuster budget. Hugh Jackman anchors the chaos with committed, if occasionally overwhelmed, action hero charisma. Its climactic werewolf battle remains a real spectacle regardless of the surrounding critical reception. The production reportedly rebuilt several standing sets from Universal's classic monster films specifically to visually connect the movie to its 1940s predecessors. Our pick for the biggest budget spectacle on this list, werewolf mythology scaled up to full summer blockbuster size. Number 21. Underworld, 2003. Amid a centuries-old secret war between vampires and a rival werewolf faction known as Lycans, a vampire death dealer investigating a break in the fragile truce falls for a human man whose bloodline turns out to hold the key to the entire conflict's origins. Director Len Wiseman built an entire Gothic industrial visual identity around the film. All rain-slicked streets, leather trench coats, and blue-tinted cinematography that proved influential well beyond the werewolf genre specifically. Its dense, convoluted, centuries-spanning mythology can overwhelm viewers unfamiliar with the eventual multi-film franchise this first entry helped launch. That density also gives the werewolf side of the conflict authentic political and historical weight rarely afforded lycanthropes elsewhere, an oppressed faction with real grievances rather than simple mindless monsters. Kate Beckinsale's commanding lead performance anchors the sprawling mythology throughout. Its commercial success spawned numerous sequels, though this original remains the tightest and most focused entry in the saga. The film's success reportedly caught its studio by surprise, leading to a hastily developed sequel franchise that would eventually stretch across several additional entries. Our pick for the most stylistically influential entry on this list, werewolves elevated to full political faction rather than solitary monster. Number 20. Werewolves, 2024. 1 year after a rare supermoon permanently altered anyone exposed to its light into werewolves during the full moon, a scientist searching for a cure finds his own family and community besieged as the next supermoon approaches, threatening an even more catastrophic wave of transformations. Director Stephen C. Miller frames the film as a survival siege thriller on a global apocalyptic scale, treating lycanthropy as a mass casualty pandemic event rather than an isolated personal curse. Its heavy reliance on digital creature effects and a fairly formulaic survival horror structure drew a distinctly mixed critical reception on release, with pacing and execution feeling familiar rather than innovative. That familiarity aside, the film's ambitious pandemic-scale premise offers a convincingly different angle on werewolf mythology than the intimate personal curses most other entries on this list explore. Frank Grillo anchors the chaos with reliable, grounded action hero conviction throughout. Its apocalyptic scope distinguishes it from the genre's usual smaller-scale storytelling. Filming took place largely in Ohio, doubling for the film's unspecified rural American setting during its production. Our pick for the most recent large-scale entry on this list, werewolf horror reimagined as a full pandemic emergency. Number 19. Wolfman, 2025. A father relocating his family to his childhood home in rural Oregon is attacked by an unseen creature during the drive, and over the course of one increasingly desperate night, begins transforming in front of his wife and daughter, who must decide how long they can shelter beside someone slowly becoming something else entirely. Director Leigh Whannell, fresh off reinventing the Invisible Man for modern audiences, takes a similarly grounded, practical effects-driven approach here, largely confining the story to one house over one night rather than sprawling werewolf mythology. Its slow-building, almost entirely single-location structure will test viewers expecting a more action-driven modern monster movie from the premise. That restraint mirrors the approach that made Whannell's earlier reinvention so effective, treating the transformation as a devastating, intimate family tragedy rather than pure creature feature spectacle. Christopher Abbott anchors the physical and emotional transformation with sincere, wrenching commitment. Its practical, body horror-inflected transformation effects mark a deliberate departure from the character's classic Universal look. Universal reportedly considered several different title treatments before settling on the simple, direct callback to the original 1941 classic. Whannell reportedly drew inspiration from real accounts of caregiving during a loved one's terminal illness while shaping the film's central family dynamic. Our pick for the most recent reinvention on this list: the Wolfman rebuilt as an intimate chamber piece. Number 18. The Wolfman, 2010. Returning to his family's Gothic English estate following his brother's brutal death, a troubled actor is bitten by a werewolf while investigating the killing, setting off his own transformation in a desperate struggle against a curse that appears to run through his own bloodline and his estranged father's dark secrets. This lavish remake of Universal's 1941 classic restores much of the original's Gothic mood and tragic romanticism, pairing extensive practical transformation makeup from legendary effects artist Rick Baker with then cutting-edge digital enhancement. Its notoriously troubled production, including reshoots, a replaced director, and a delayed release, resulted in a somewhat uneven final tone that never fully settled on its own identity. That unevenness aside, the film's transformation sequences remain an unmistakable highlight, blending practical and digital techniques into some of the most technically accomplished werewolf effects work the genre has produced. Benicio del Toro anchors the tragedy with real brooding gravity throughout. Its lavish Gothic production design honors the original film's atmosphere faithfully. Rick Baker's practical transformation work was reportedly supplemented extensively with digital effects added late in post-production after the film's director was replaced. Our pick for the most technically accomplished transformation on this list: classic tragedy rebuilt with modern effects muscle. Number 17. Trick or Treat, 2007. Across one interconnected Halloween night in a small American town, several loosely linked stories unfold simultaneously, among them a schoolteacher hiding a monstrous secret of her own, revealed in the film's climactic segment to be a werewolf whose true nature has been hiding in plain sight the entire runtime. Writer-director Michael Dougherty structures the film as a beautifully interwoven horror anthology, with characters and timelines crossing between segments in ways that reward close attention and repeat viewings. Its unconventional, non-linear anthology structure and the werewolf reveal's relatively brief screen time mean lycanthropy fans hoping for a dedicated werewolf feature may want more focus than this ensemble format allows. That restraint is part of an undeniably beloved modern horror anthology, one that treats its werewolf twist as a clever final piece of a much larger puzzle rather than the whole point. Anna Paquin anchors the climactic segment with a performance that recontextualizes everything preceding it. Its now iconic pumpkin-headed mascot Sam has become a true modern horror icon in his own right. The segment featuring the werewolf reveal was reportedly filmed separately from the rest of the anthology and integrated carefully into the finished interwoven structure. Director Michael Dougherty spent nearly a decade trying to secure a theatrical release for the finished film before it eventually reached wider audiences on home video. Our pick for the cleverest twist on this list: a werewolf reveal hiding inside horror's best modern anthology. Number 16. The Monster Squad, 1987. A group of monster-obsessed kids running their own amateur horror fan club find their fandom becoming terrifyingly literal when Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, the Mummy, the Creature, and a snarling Wolfman all descend on their small town at once, forcing the children into an unlikely real-life monster hunt. Director Fred Decker, co-writing with a young Shane Black, blends Amblin-style kid adventure charm with noticeably committed practical monster effects, giving each classic Universal creature real presence, rather than simple comic relief cameos. Its modest box office performance on release meant the film went largely unnoticed for years before slowly building an intense cult following through home video. That cult devotion is thoroughly earned, particularly through Stan Winston's markedly unsettling Wolfman design, which brings real practical effects menace to what could easily have been the film's most cartoonish monster. Its blend of childhood wonder and legitimate creature feature scares remains a beloved singular combination. The film's earnest, unpretentious charm has aged remarkably well. Stan Winston's werewolf design reportedly took considerable convincing from the filmmakers, who wanted a more frightening creature than the studio initially envisioned for a family-adjacent adventure film. Our pick for the most purely beloved cult entry on this list, monster movie nostalgia filtered through honest kid adventure heart. Number 15. What We Do in the Shadows, 2014. A documentary crew embeds with a household of ancient vampires sharing a flat in modern Wellington, and their ongoing feud with a local pack of werewolves, self-consciously insisting they are werewolves and not swearwolves, provides some of the mockumentary's funniest, most quotable supporting material across the film's runtime. Co-directors Jermaine Clement and Taika Waititi build the entire film around deadpan mockumentary comedy, treating centuries-old monster rivalries with the mundane pettiness of squabbling flatmates and neighborhood cliques. Its vampire-focused framing means the werewolf pack functions as brilliant supporting texture rather than the film's central subject, a limitation for viewers wanting a dedicated werewolf feature specifically. That supporting role is used to truly hilarious effect regardless, the werewolf pack's rigid self-imposed rules against swearing becoming one of the most quoted running jokes in modern horror comedy. Rhys Darby anchors the werewolf pack with perfectly earnest comic commitment. Its influence helped spawn both a television series and a broader monster mockumentary trend. The mockumentary format allowed the werewolf cast considerable room for improvisation, with several of the pack's now famous lines reportedly developed on set rather than scripted in advance. Our pick for the funniest entry on this list, werewolves reduced to squabbling, foul-mouth-avoiding suburbanites and somehow funnier for it. Number 14. The Wolf of Snow Hollow 2020. A recovering alcoholic small-town sheriff's deputy, already buckling under personal and professional pressure, investigates a string of brutal murders that the local community insist must be the work of a werewolf, even as he desperately clings to more rational explanations for what is actually happening. Writer-director-star Jim Cummings blends dark comedy with unfeigned psychological tension, using the werewolf premise as a backdrop for an anxious, richly human character study of a man visibly falling apart under mounting pressure. Its unconventional tonal mix of comedy, procedural drama, and horror will surprise viewers expecting a more straightforward creature feature from the marketing. That mixture is exactly what critics responded to on release, a really fresh, idiosyncratic voice bringing real emotional specificity to well-worn werewolf mechanics. Cummings' raw, increasingly unraveling laid performance carries the film's mounting dread and dark humor in equal measure. Its small mountain town setting grounds the mystery in believable, lived-in community detail. Jim Cummings shot the film on a tight, independent budget following the acclaim of his earlier feature Thunder Road, again writing, directing, and starring simultaneously. Our pick for the most tonally distinctive entry on this list, werewolf horror filtered entirely through one man's spiraling breakdown. Number 13. Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, 1943. Desperate to finally end his own cursed existence, Lawrence Talbot the Wolfman seeks out Frankenstein's creator's remaining notes, hoping for a permanent cure, a search that instead reunites him with the still-living Frankenstein monster for cinema's first-ever direct crossover between two separate classic movie monsters. Universal built the entire film around this unmistakably novel crossover concept, years before shared cinematic universes became an industry standard, letting two established franchises collide directly rather than simply referencing each other. Its slightly thin plotting exists mainly in service of engineering the title crossover rather than developing either character particularly deeply on its own terms. That crossover novelty was hugely successful commercially regardless, effectively inventing the Monster Mash formula Universal would keep returning to for the rest of the decade. Lon Chaney Jr. once again anchors Talbot's tragic desperation for release from his own curse. Its climactic monster versus monster showdown remains an earnest landmark in crossover cinema history. The crossover concept reportedly originated from a Universal executive's suggestion during a routine planning meeting, rather than a planned franchise strategy from the outset. Our pick for the most historically inventive entry on this list, the werewolf genre's very first team-up movie. Number 12. Wolf, 2021. A teenage boy who plainly believes himself to be a wolf trapped inside a human body is committed by his parents to a clinic specializing in species dysphoria, where a sadistic zookeeper-styled therapist attempts to forcibly cure him and other similarly afflicted young patients through cruel behavioral conditioning. Writer-director Natalie Biancheri deliberately avoids any supernatural transformation entirely, framing the premise as psychological rather than literal lycanthropy, closer to a metaphor for identity, conformity, and institutional cruelty than a traditional monster movie. Its unflinching, occasionally punishing depiction of abusive therapy has proven thoroughly divisive, with some viewers finding the metaphor powerful and others finding the execution needlessly bleak. That divisiveness aside, the film's committed performances and unusual premise offer a wholly distinctive angle on wolf mythology unlike anything else on this list, using the wolf as pure psychological identity rather than supernatural curse. George McKay's committed, physically demanding lead performance anchors the film's discomfort. Its refusal of easy answers keeps the film startlingly unsettling throughout. The film's clinic setting was reportedly inspired partly by real accounts of conversion therapy institutions, lending the fictional premise an uncomfortable grounding in documented practice. Our pick for the most unconventional entry on this list, lycanthropy reimagined entirely as psychological identity rather than curse. Number 11. Brotherhood of the Wolf, 2001. Loosely inspired by the real 18th century legend of the Beast of Gévaudan, a naturalist and his Iroquois companion are sent to investigate a series of brutal killings terrorizing the French countryside, uncovering a conspiracy far more elaborate than a simple wild animal once their investigation digs deeper. Director Christophe Gans fuses period costume drama, martial arts action choreography, and gothic monster horror into something unusually unlike anything else on this list, treating the beast's true nature as one mystery among several political and romantic threads. Its nearly 2.5-hour runtime and genre-blending ambition ask real patience from viewers expecting a more streamlined creature feature. That ambition pays off in one of the most visually sumptuous, structurally unusual werewolf-adjacent films ever made, blending period spectacle with deeply inventive fight choreography rarely seen in the genre. Mark Dacascos brings real physical grace to the film's martial arts-inflected combat sequences. Its practical creature design for the beast itself remains suitably fearsome and mysterious. The real unsolved 18th century killings that inspired the film remain a real historical mystery in France, with theories about the beast's true nature still debated by historians today. Our pick for the most genre-blending entry on this list, werewolf horror fused with a swashbuckling period epic. Number 10. Werewolf by Night, 2022. A secretive society of monster hunters gathers following their leader's death to compete in a ritual hunt for a captured creature. unaware that one of the assembled hunters is himself concealing a monstrous secret directly tied to the very bloodline they have all sworn to destroy. Director Michael Giacchino, better known as a composer making his directorial debut, shot this Marvel Studios special presentation in stark black and white specifically to evoke classic universal horror, complete with deliberately old-fashioned transitions, practical creature effects, and an authentically committed gothic atmosphere rare for a modern blockbuster property. Its short, hour-long runtime limits how deeply any single character or thread can be explored compared to a full feature. That brevity works entirely in its favor, though, delivering a tight, purely enjoyable homage that clearly understands and loves the genre history it is drawing from rather than simply referencing it superficially. Gael Garcia Bernal anchors the mystery with legitimate wounded commitment. Its practical transformation effects and monochrome cinematography remain a real surprise from a major studio property. Michael Giacchino reportedly financed early test footage himself to convince Marvel Studios the black and white concept could work before the project received official approval. Our pick for the most lovingly crafted homage on this list, a mainstream franchise remembering exactly where the genre came from. Number 9. Wolfwalkers, 2020. In 17th century Ireland, the daughter of an English hunter sent to exterminate the local wolf population secretly befriends a wild girl who can shapeshift between human and wolf form, a bond that pits her growing loyalty against her father's colonial mission and her own community's fear of the forest. Studio Cartoon Saloon, drawing on authentic Irish folklore about wolfwalkers, hand animates the film with two distinct visual styles: rigid geometric lines for the walled colonial town and flowing organic line work for the surrounding wild forest, a formal choice that carries real thematic weight throughout. Its animated format and folklore-rooted fantasy framing set it apart considerably from the traditional live-action werewolf horror dominating most of this list. That distinction is exactly why the film belongs here regardless. One of the most visually inventive and emotionally rich pieces of wolf transformation storytelling any medium has produced, earning a well-deserved Academy Award nomination for its efforts. Its central friendship carries real, aching, emotional weight across the runtime. Cartoon Saloon spent years researching authentic Irish folklore and 17th century Kilkenny history to ground the film's fantastical premise in real cultural detail. The film earned Ireland's first Academy Award nomination for Best Animated Feature in over a decade, renewing international attention on the country's animation industry. Our pick for the most visually breathtaking entry on this list: werewolf mythology rendered as pure, gorgeous folklore rather than horror. Number 8. Silver Bullet, 1985. A wheelchair-bound boy in a small American town becomes convinced a series of brutal local murders are the work of a werewolf, and with the help of his devoted uncle and skeptical older sister, sets out to identify and stop the creature before the local sheriff's dismissive investigation lets it kill again. Adapted by Stephen King from his own novella cycle of The Werewolf, the film balances small-town Americana warmth with convincingly brutal werewolf violence, anchored by a real, lived-in sibling relationship at its emotional core. Its television movie visual polish and some uneven pacing in the middle stretch keep it from reaching the top tier of King adaptations from the same decade. What the film gets consistently right is Everett McGill's undeniably committed werewolf performance and a satisfying, well-earned identity reveal that rewards attentive viewers who piece together the clues themselves. Gary Busey's boisterous uncle steals nearly every scene he appears in. Its blend of King's small-town character work and sincere monster movie stakes remains a fan favorite decades later. Stephen King reportedly wrote the original novella specifically as a calendar format story, with each chapter corresponding to a different month leading up to the climax. Our pick for the most beloved King adaptation on this list: small-town warmth colliding head-on with real werewolf brutality. Number 7. The Wolfman, 1941. Returning to his family's Welsh estate after years away, Larry Talbot is bitten by a gypsy fortune-teller's cursed son while trying to save a friend, and soon finds himself transforming into a murderous werewolf during the full moon, unable to stop his own violence no matter how desperately he tries to contain it. Universal's defining werewolf picture codified nearly every convention the genre would rely on for the rest of the century: the full moon trigger, the silver bullet cure, the tragic sufferer who begs to be stopped, all largely established or cemented right here. Its deliberate theatrical pacing reflects 1940s studio filmmaking conventions rather than modern horror rhythms, a slower burn than audiences accustomed to faster contemporary pacing might expect. That deliberate pace serves Lon Chaney Jr.'s noticeably affecting central performance, playing Talbot's curse as unbearable personal tragedy rather than simple monster spectacle, a sympathetic monster template the genre has returned to constantly ever since. Its iconic transformation makeup, applied one agonizing layer at a time, remains a landmark of practical effects artistry. Jack Pierce's transformation makeup process reportedly took several hours to apply in stages, with Lon Chaney Jr. required to remain still for each layered application. The film's box office success at the height of World War II reportedly surprised Universal executives, who had expected wartime audiences to favor lighter fare over gothic tragedy. Our pick for the single most influential entry on this list, the film every other werewolf movie is still quietly answering to. Number 6. Wolfen, 1981. A burnt-out New York City detective investigating a string of gruesome murders in a derelict South Bronx neighborhood uncovers evidence suggesting the killer may not be human at all, but an ancient predatory species of intelligent wolf-like creatures that have quietly hunted the city's margins for far longer than any human resident. Director Michael Wadley grounds the film's horror in real urban decay and Native American folklore rather than traditional full-moon werewolf mythology, treating the Wolfen as a markedly intelligent, near-supernatural apex species rather than cursed humans. Its slower, more procedural pacing and thoughtful ecological themes about urban development and displaced wildlife set it apart considerably from more visceral werewolf horror of the same era. That thoughtfulness gives the film unusually substantial thematic weight, using its creature mythology to comment directly on urban decay, indigenous displacement, and humanity's arrogant disregard for older, wiser predators sharing its cities. Albert Finney anchors the mounting dread with world-weary conviction throughout. Its innovative predator point-of-view camera work remains truly inventive decades later. Director Michael Wadley had previously directed the concert documentary Woodstock, making this atmospheric creature feature an unusual genre departure for his second feature. Our pick for the most thematically substantial entry on this list: werewolf mythology used to interrogate an entire decaying city. Number 5. The Company of Wolves, 1984. A teenage girl drifting into vivid dreams reimagines Little Red Riding Hood as a tangle of interconnected fairy tales about wolves, desire, and transformation, each one folding into the next until the boundary between fable and nightmare stops holding entirely. Director Neil Jordan, adapting Angela Carter's own reworking of the fairy tale, builds an entire gothic forest on sound stages rather than location shooting, giving the film a deliberately theatrical storybook unreality that suits its dream logic perfectly. Its fractured, non-linear structure, stories nesting inside stories rather than one clear plot, asks real patience from viewers expecting a more straightforward werewolf narrative. That structure is inseparable from the film's real achievement, a feminist reworking of werewolf folklore that treats transformation as something closer to sexual awakening than simple horror, anchored by really unsettling practical transformation effects, a face splitting open from within rather than just growing fur. Angela Lansbury's grandmother narrator anchors the fable with real warmth before each story turns dark. Angela Carter herself co-wrote the screenplay, adapting her own short stories from The Bloody Chamber rather than handing the material to another writer entirely. Our pick for the most literary entry on this list, werewolf folklore rebuilt as an unmistakable feminist fever dream. Number 4. Ginger Snaps, 2000. Two death-obsessed teenage sisters bound by a shared pact to escape their suburban Canadian town together find their bond tested when the elder sister is bitten by a werewolf on the very night of her first period, her subsequent transformation becoming an unmistakable, unflinching metaphor for adolescent female sexuality and bodily change. Writer Karen Walton and director John Fawcett fuse werewolf horror directly with coming-of-age body horror, treating lycanthropy and puberty as functionally the same terrifying, uncontrollable process happening to the same teenage body. Its deliberately blunt, sometimes uncomfortable metaphor will not be for every viewer, though its sharp, cutting screenplay balances true dread with real dark comedic wit throughout. That directness is exactly why the film has become such a beloved cult classic and an honest landmark of feminist horror, using werewolf mythology to say something specific and unflinching that few other entries on this list even attempt. Emily Perkins and Catherine Isabel anchor the sisters' fracturing bond with raw, believable intensity. Its practical transformation effects grow unmistakably disturbing as the film progresses. Director John Fawcett reportedly fought the studio to keep the film's body horror elements intact after test audiences responded uneasily to early cuts. Our pick for the sharpest feminist entry on this list, puberty and lycanthropy fused into one inseparable nightmare. Number 3. The Howling, 1981. A television news anchor recovering from a traumatic encounter with a serial killer retreats to a remote coastal therapy colony to recover, only to discover the seemingly welcoming community is entirely populated by werewolves who have been quietly, patiently waiting for exactly this kind of vulnerable new arrival. Director Joe Dante, working from Dee Wallace's plainly committed lead performance, treats the werewolf colony premise with real satirical bite aimed at self-help culture and New Age therapy movements, layering sharp cultural commentary beneath the creature feature mechanics. Its ambitious tonal mix of horror and dark comedy occasionally strains against Rob Bottin's thoroughly revolutionary practical transformation effects, which are so technically show-stopping they threaten to overshadow everything else happening around them. That transformation sequence alone reshaped the entire genre's technical ambitions overnight, a bone-cracking, flesh-stretching centerpiece that remains an unfeigned landmark of practical effects craft over 4 decades later. Its influence on every subsequent werewolf transformation is nearly impossible to overstate. Rob Bottin reportedly worked around the clock for weeks straight to complete the transformation sequence's effects work ahead of the film's release deadline. Our pick for the most technically revolutionary entry on this list, the transformation scene that permanently raised the genre's entire bar. Number 2. An American Werewolf in London, 1981. 2 young American backpackers attacked on the Yorkshire moors find themselves victims of a werewolf attack that leaves one dead and haunting his surviving friend, who wakes up in a London hospital slowly realizing he now carries the same curse that killed his best friend on that remote moor. Writer-director John Landis balances the film on an extraordinarily difficult tonal knife's edge, wholly hilarious dark comedy sitting directly beside real body horror and earnest grief, a combination few filmmakers before or since have managed this successfully. Its willingness to constantly undercut horror with comedy and comedy with real horror occasionally disorients viewers expecting a more tonally consistent genre picture throughout. That tonal daring is precisely why the film endures as an all-time genre landmark, anchored by Rick Baker's Academy Award-winning transformation sequence, still considered by many practical effects artists the single greatest werewolf transformation ever committed to film. David Naughton's increasingly desperate performance carries real pathos beneath the film's constant wit. Its blend of comedy, horror, and legitimate heartbreak remains completely unmatched. Rick Baker won the very first Academy Award ever given for makeup, a category reportedly created in direct response to the transformation work achieved in this film. Our pick for the most perfectly balanced entry on this list, comedy and horror fused with a precision nothing else here quite achieves. Number 1. Our pick for the finest werewolf film ever made, Dog Soldiers, 2002. One quick note before we get into it, this is the boldest call on the entire list, ranked here above the genre's own most celebrated classic, An American Werewolf in London, and we are prepared to defend it. A squad of British soldiers on a routine training exercise in the remote Scottish Highlands stumbles onto a slaughtered Special Forces unit and, within hours, finds itself besieged inside an isolated farmhouse by an entire pack of werewolves with no backup, no working transport, and dwindling ammunition standing between them and dawn. Writer-director Neil Marshall, working with a tiny budget and a cast of largely unknown actors, builds the film almost entirely around pure, escalating siege tension, soldiers barricading doors, rationing bullets, and turning on each other under pressure, giving the werewolves themselves a real, terrifying sense of tactical intelligence rather than mindless monster behavior. What sets the film above its more celebrated predecessor is exactly this relentless focus, an unbroken, nearly real-time siege that never once lets up once the farmhouse doors are barricaded, sustaining pure practical effects dread for its entire back half without a single wasted scene. Its tight ensemble cast, particularly Kevin McKidd and Sean Pertwee, sells both the camaraderie and the mounting dread completely. Its practical werewolf suits remain startlingly effective, physical, and threatening throughout, sold entirely through commitment and darkness rather than budget. Filmed on a shoestring budget in under a month, the production reportedly built its own practical werewolf suits from scratch after existing costume rental options proved unaffordable. Our pick for the single most purely intense entry on this entire list, a farmhouse siege that never once loosens its grip until sunrise finally, mercifully arrives. So there it is. 50 different howls across nearly a century of cinema. From biker gangs cursed on the open road to a squad of soldiers barricaded in a farmhouse with nothing but rifles and bad odds. Werewolves have always been horror's most personal monster. The fear that the person closest to you or you yourself might already be changing into something else entirely. These were our picks. Tell us your own favorite. Tell us which transformation scene we left howling outside a list of 50 entirely. And if any of these are still unwatched, maybe check the calendar before you press play. This has been Movie Blanket Club.